All right, welcome everyone. I call the October 6, 2021 Planning Commission meeting to order. The main purpose of tonight's meeting is a study session on the Canyon Park Subarea Plan implementation, focusing on the bonus incentive system. Before we move on to the agenda items, I'd like to acknowledge our remote meeting format. As with our previous meetings, the commissioners and staff will be participating via Zoom. During this Zoom meeting, the chat and question functions are not available for use to ensure compliance with the Open Public Meetings Act. We have a public comment agenda item at the beginning of the meeting. This is time for comments on issues not on tonight's agenda. Please limit those comments to 3 minutes. Under Governor Inslee's Proclamation 20-28 regarding open public meetings, this meeting will be held remotely. Public comment will be allowed both in writing and orally. The Imagine Bothell notice, city website, and tonight's agenda all provided information to the public for providing comments. People wishing to comment were instructed to notify staff or provide written comments by 3 p.m. today. The video of this meeting will be streamed live as well as recorded and available for later viewing on the city's YouTube channel. A call-in number was provided on the meeting agenda for members of the public who wish to call in by phone and listen to the meeting. For our phone-in callers, during staff presentations, staff will make every effort to specify which materials they're referencing so everyone can follow along. Those who provided advance notice were able to make comments under the audience comment portion of the meeting. Email was encouraged as well and will be acknowledged. At this point, I'd like to acknowledge the attendance of the commissioners. Commissioner Dodd.
Present.
Commissioner Westerbeck is absent and excused. Commissioner Curd.
Here.
Commissioner Robson.
Robson here.
Robson, sorry. I have it written on my notes too. Commissioner Alderks.
Present.
And Commissioner Gustafson.
Here.
All right, all commissioners are either present or absent and excused. In addition, Community Development Director Michael Cotterman is present, and Senior Planner Nathan Lamb, and also Jeannie Ash, Economic Development Manager, are in attendance. Lastly, before we begin, I'd like to reiterate some meeting guidelines. For all meeting attendees, please speak clearly and pause frequently. State your name each time before speaking. Mute your microphone when not speaking and unmute before you start speaking. If you are also streaming the live video feed, please turn the sound off as there is a delay. For commissioners, at specific breaks in the presentation, I will be calling on members who wish to speak or ask a question. If you wish to speak, please indicate this by holding up a yellow card, and I will acknowledge you as soon as I recognize you. I may need to scroll back and forth, so please be patient. This will help avoid the problem of 2 people speaking at the same time. Identify yourself before you ask a question, make a motion, second a motion, or participate in debate. And again, please mute your microphone when not speaking. So with that, the first item on the agenda is public comment. In keeping with Governor Jay Inslee's Emergency Proclamation 20-28 regarding public meetings and public gatherings and open public meetings, the city has accepted visitor comment in writing, as well as accepted sign-up sheets for those who wish to speak at tonight's meeting. Written comments submitted to staff no later than 3 p.m. today were forwarded to all commissioners, although we haven't received any, so I'm assuming there were none. So this is a time for items not on the agenda. Director Cotterman, have we received any comments?
We have not, Mr. Chair. I did not receive any, and we do not have anyone in the attendee room. I'll just check with Senior Planner Lamb very quickly to confirm whether he received any comments prior to the meeting today.
I did not receive any comments prior to the meeting. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
So seeing as we received no comments prior to the meeting and no one is seeking to comment at this time, I will close that public comment portion of the meeting and move on to the next item. The next item is approval of minutes. We have before us the minutes of the September 15th meeting. Is there a motion to approve those minutes? Commissioner Curd.
I move to approve the meeting minutes from September 15th, 2021.
Is there a motion to second? Commissioner Dodd.
Seconded.
Okay, it has been moved and seconded. The minutes have been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion around those minutes? Looking across all of the commissioners, I see no indication of anyone seeking to discuss those minutes. So with that, all in favor of approval of the minutes, please indicate so. I see all commissioners raising their hands. So the minutes are approved unanimously. Thank you. Move on to the next item, new business. Director Cotterman, is there any new business for us?
Just one quick item, Mr. Chair. I've noted that we are having a thunderstorm right now where I'm living. So we tend to lose power quite easily here. If I do drop out, you'll know why. And Mr. Lamb will take over and complete the meeting, and I'll get back on as quickly as I can if that happens. So
We won't take it personally if you leave us.
thank you. Certainly not meant that way.
All right. Thank you. So the next item on the agenda is a study session on the Canyon Park Subarea Plan Bonus Incentive System. And Senior Planner Lamb will lead us through that item. Senior Planner Lamb, are you ready to take over?
I'm ready, Mr. Chairman. Let me go ahead and share the screen here. Hopefully I get it on the first shot. You all should be able to see my screen. So I'll get right into it. So we're excited to be back in front of you all with an item that we brought earlier this year. So after 6 months, we're finally back with some follow-up for you. We are going to be discussing the bonus FAR incentive system in Canyon Park, rehashing our discussion from last time. And there were some instructions in the package that went out to you all that we would be discussing two of the four public benefits, which were deeper housing affordability and affordable commercial space at this meeting. And then at the October 20th meeting, we would discuss the green building and green infrastructure public benefits that you all identified. So with this presentation, we're asking for you all to bear with us because we do have quite a bit of information to get through. There were some discussion questions in your package that would be using for guidance tonight, and we'll get through the presentation and reserve our discussion for the end so we can kind of lay a foundation and cover the information that we need to get through to have a more complete picture of this framework and a more complete and robust discussion. Just in case anybody has just joined us, we do have Jeannie Ash, who is the Economic Development Manager for the City Manager's office in Bothell. She's here with us tonight, and she's got a lot of insight on Canyon Park business. And so she'll be here in case there's any tough questions that Director Cotterman and I can't answer. Be happy to have her join the discussion. And I think next week, so the next meeting, we'll also have some more guests, probably from Public Works, to help us with the green infrastructure portion. And then we'd like to have Mike Stanger from Coalition for Regional Housing. I think I butchered that, but all of my acronyms are getting kind of jumbled together right now. But anyway, you're well acquainted with Mike, and we'd like to have him come help us with follow-up questions from tonight at the next meeting. So a lot going on. And with that, I'll hop in here, and we're following the same format that we have been for the last few meetings, just starting off with some review, especially for our viewers. When we talk about bonus FAR, we're referring to floor area ratio. And the basic definition for that is the floor area of all buildings on a lot divided by the area of that lot. We spent a lot of time on this at our last meeting for our transfer development rights discussion. And here's a simple illustration that describes what that is. And last time we focused on the minimum FAR ratios here in this first row, but tonight we're going to be focusing on the maximum base FARs ratios that you see in this row. And you'll recall from seeing this table for the last few meetings, there was a sort of a placeholder that was left when the Canyon Park subarea plan regulations were adopted at the beginning, or were effective at the beginning of this year. And it says that with incentives, there's no set maximum FAR. And so any bonus FAR is going to be over these maximums here. So just keep that in mind as we go on. And then again, grounding ourselves in policy that we've sort of already put in place. This is from the sub-area plan itself. One of the most mentioned policies is this MN number 4, evolving Canyon Park into a multifaceted neighborhood. And that policy gives us direction to create incentives and other regulations to achieve desired development, especially affordable housing, which we spent which we did spend quite a bit of time talking about when we last met on this item. Again, you see the TDR placeholder here in the Bothell Municipal Code for the development regulations in Canyon Park. And there was another placeholder that was left for a bonus FAR in section 12.48.190. And so that is why we are here tonight. Okay, so at the March 17th meeting earlier this year, the commissioners, you all didn't establish parameters per se, but sort of discussed what's listed here. And this was from our recollection of what you all talked about. And so this is what we're sort of using to move forward with, and that we'd like to that we should solidify at some point, probably tonight as we move forward. But some of these go without saying also. The first one is pretty important. Participation is voluntary, so as not to be misconstrued with the mandatory requirements in Canyon Park. So this is entirely voluntary. The maximum base FAR can only be exceeded through a bonus FAR program. We kind of touched on that with that one of those first slides we looked at with the table. It shall not be used to meet mandatory affordable housing requirements. So a developer could only qualify for bonus FAR after meeting those mandatory requirements that are currently adopted. And then in lieu fees as an option are limited. We had some discussion about in lieu fees, and our recollection was that while they're useful at establishing funds, they might not be as useful in that they don't provide for tracking and maintenance and some other things associated with administration of programs. And so they're limited in that regard. And then finally, that developers shall provide some public benefits or bonus FAR. And in exchange for bonus FAR, this is what we had you all listing as what you would like to see: deeper housing affordability, affordable commercial space, green building, and green infrastructure. This, I think, is how they were prioritized at that March 7th meeting. They certainly don't have to stay this way, but I think our conversation later will probably want to make sure that we all have consensus that this is the priority for bonus FAR for moving forward. Planning Commission also asked staff to sort of look at the scope with a triple bottom line lens. The staff and obviously Planning Commission value using this lens and looking at the social, environmental, and economic impacts of such a program. And so staff has done that, and we've provided a little bit of that information in the matrices that were provided in your reports, and we'll look at those this evening. So obviously, with the social impacts, we if we're talking about creating multifaceted neighborhoods, we obviously want to create opportunities for everyone in Canyon Park and not limit anyone or any communities from being able to live or and play and work in Canyon Park. In terms of profit, we understand that everyone has a bottom line, and that we want people to prosper and flourish. And the bottom line for development is that buildings cost a lot of money. And so there's going to be stakeholders looking at this in terms of what the cost is to provide those public benefits, and what the benefit that they're able to generate from that. And then last but not least is the environmental impacts. Bothell certainly, and just in Washington State, we care about our ecosystems and local ecosystems, and we want to make sure that we're not doing anything that doesn't add value or a net gain to our environment. And so moving on, Planning Commission also asked staff to look at the duration of public benefits, the stakeholders involved and what gains they would get from the benefits and for how long. And so continuing with our triple bottom line lens here, this, depending on the provisions of the program, there could be short-term gains and long-term gains. We think we've identified those in your report, although we really do want to hear some feedback if there was anything that we missed that should be added, or if we need to readjust how we're looking at how gains would be utilized and for how long by stakeholders. And so just for the people component, depending on the provisions, again, affordable housing units could be affordable for a certain amount of time, or they could be affordable for the lifetime of the project. Affordable commercial space could be affordable for a certain amount of time and for in perpetuity. And so those are the things we need to keep in mind if we want to sustain the kind of communities that we're talking about having in Canyon Park. From a profit perspective, staff will be approaching our analysis similarly to what my counterpart, senior planner Dave Boyd and Mike Stenger at Arch did for their GDC amendments and MFTE provisions benefit ratio analysis that they did. And, we want to keep in mind, again, that there has to be the incentive has to work, in that there has to be a benefit for the developer and builders as well, in exchange for those public benefits. And we're just not assuming, but just the way MFTE was structured with hand in hand with the GDC amendments, those are sort of long-term gains, and that's why they're desirable to developers. I believe the example cities that were used in a report to council for MFTE were Bellevue, Redmond, and Kirkland. And so we sort of know, that at least with MFTE, in conjunction with other city programs, that there's long-term benefits. But I'm kind of jumping ahead. We'll get into that discussion in a few slides here. And then again, last but not least, the impact on the environment. Does Planning Commission want to award the same amount of bonus FAR for green building standards that, may reduce greenhouse gases. But do you want to award the same amount to something that might have more of a immediate measurable impact, like stream restoration or wetland restoration or the like? And so those are the things that we need to keep in mind as we try to narrow down the framework for this bonus FAR system. Okay, so now we are into discussing deeper housing affordability. This was the table that was provided in your report. The applicable land uses are anything with a residential component, of course, multifamily, micro apartments, missing middle, and mixed use buildings. We have our triple bottom line lens. We have stakeholder gains, which for people we're saying is increased affordable housing stock, and we saw that as a long-term gain. For profit, we say that cash return on units built with bonus FAR is a long-term gain. And for the environment, we say smaller building footprints and building up and not out with bonus FAR is a long-term gain. And again, we do want to hear back from you all to make sure we don't need to reconsider especially the duration of the gains and the stakeholders who are gaining as we move forward. Here's some policy at the bottom of the slide. Again, just grounding ourselves, make sure we're doing what the plan told us we should all be doing. And it says that affordable housing strategies should include requiring, incentivizing, and in conjunction with its housing partners, funding affordable housing at low, medium, and middle income levels. So we already require affordable housing in Canyon Park, and we're working on the incentivizing more of it part, and certainly in the future, helping to fund affordable housing. And that's already a discussion that we're starting to have with the TDR item to see if that's a possibility through TDR credits and proceeds. Here's our discussion questions that we're going to come back to later. For deeper housing affordability, we see it being provided through two methods that we're calling layering and stacking. And this is kind of, again, building off the analysis that was done for the GDC amendments and MFTE in Bothell. So for layering, we're saying that after meeting the mandatory affordability and MFTE requirements, a developer could qualify for bonus FAR by one of these three options that we'll discuss. One is deepening affordability beyond mandatory and MFTE requirements, or providing more affordable units beyond mandatory and MFTE requirements, or utilizing either of those options depending on the proposed project and priorities of the city at the time. Okay, and then stacking is what we're calling, what we're describing as the developer provides more than one of those four public benefits to gain more FAR. And we're going to go ahead and use a cake analogy here, because who doesn't like cake? And the tasty chocolate picture that's at the top there, we're trying to think of this as the cake is like the mandatory requirements and the bonus FAR, and the frosting in the middle is the layers of MFTE and other city programs that could be worked in here. But it's just a good analogy to help us think about layering versus stacking, whereas stacking is sort of like a more of a tiered cake where let's say Planning Commission awards a certain ratio of bonus FAR for affordable commercial space, and that's your first tier that the developer uses. And then the second tier is a different ratio of bonus FAR for making that building with affordable commercial space up to LEED certified building. And so on. And so we have to, have that discussion. Do we want to limit the amount of bonus FAR that a developer could get, and if so, how do we do that? Okay, so again, we're going to come back to this in the layering scenario. These are the questions that we had for commissioners in the report. Which of those three options should be used? The Planning Commission wants to allow stacking. Which of those public benefits are a priority if the way we had them listed were not currently how you'd like to prioritize them? And then how long should affordable housing units stay affordable? Moving on to affordable commercial space, again, we'll revisit these slides at the end here, but we're trying to build a framework.
Nathan, you want to pause for a moment?
Sure.
And see if commissioners have any clarifying questions. So that wouldn't be for discussion of the items, just if you need any questions
Absolutely.
to better understand Nathan's presentation.
Absolutely.
And I'll scan and see, oops, did I jump right past? Yes, Commissioner Gustafson.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Senior Planner Lamb, for this really, really helpful presentation. My clarifying question, I think it's a clarifying question, is what are the affordable housing mandatory provisions already in place in Canyon Park?
So, okay, I believe so. It's for renter occupied. It's I'm going to have to go back into my notes and double check this, but I believe it's 10% of the units have to be affordable at 70% of AMI, and owner occupied has to be at 60%, I believe, or vice versa. But I know for sure that the set aside amount of units that have to be affordable is the mandatory is 10%. And you know what? I'm sorry. It's coming back to me. So renter occupied is at 70% AMI. Owner occupied is at 80% AMI.
Okay, thank you so much. And then my second question is, AMI, is that Bothell median income or King County median income?
I believe we're using King County in this instance. And I'll let Director Cotterman weigh in. I'm not sure if something else was used at the time that the regulations were adopted, but I believe it's King County.
That's correct. It is King County, and Snohomish County happens to be the same as King County.
Okay.
All right, any further clarifying questions? All right, thank you, commissioners. Senior Planner Lamb, please proceed.
Okay, thanks. Just a few more slides here. So for the same format of the table that we provided, affordable commercial space obviously applies to commercial and mixed use buildings with a commercial component. There, we provided the triple bottom line, and we say that for profit, sorry, these are not in the same order, I'm realizing now, but for the profit component, cash return on bonus lease space is a long-term benefit. Same idea with the affordable units, affordable housing units. For people, there's reduced barriers to new or rehabbed commercial space and increased availability of affordable commercial space. I left that to be determined, contingent on our discussion tonight. And we had not applicable for the environmental component. At the bottom of this slide are some action items, some policy action items from the sub-area plan. Just again, making sure we're doing what the plan directs us to do. And it says to explore options to offer incentives to developers that retain current businesses or offer business relocation assistance. And I've combined both of these here, both of these action items here, but they're directly related. And explore incentives for supporting and gaining affordable office, manufacturing, and retail space, such as exchange of height or FAR bonus for affordable commercial space. Okay, and so our discussion questions were: who specifically is eligible to qualify as tenants through this affordable commercial space? And as an example, the Portland Affordable Commercial Tenanting Program permits local women-owned, minority-owned, and financially qualified businesses as tenants. And I completely forgot to mention that for this component, we did interview someone at Prosper Portland who walked us through their ACT program. I believe that was something commissioners wanted us to do. And we also consulted with some neighboring jurisdictions, Bellingham, although they're kind of they're not a neighbor in Whatcom County, but they were listed as during our research as having a bonus FAR, robust bonus FAR program. So Bellingham, Marysville, Shoreline, and Bellevue. And so you should have seen some insight in your reports too for the success that they've been or challenges they've been having with their bonus FAR programs. But getting back on track here, the next question is, are there any important lease terms? Again, an example with the ACT program in Portland is that they require a 10-year duration where you can only re-tenant with approved tenants if the first tenant doesn't work out. And they have some other lease terms in their administrative rules. And so that would kind of add to the complexity of a program like this. But Planning Commission we need to have that discussion if that's something that we value. If a developer wants to redevelop beyond the maximum FAR, should the city award bonus FAR for retaining businesses? And finally, should the city offer fee in lieu for flexibility to let developers pay into a fund to create affordable commercial opportunities? Okay, so we'll revisit that. Here's some guidance from the sub-area plan. I think we'll reserve that for when we circle back around. And here's the last slide here. We propose some alternatives sort of based on how long they would take to implement. So alternative one was a smaller scope, the smallest scope out of the three, but that we think we could help Planning Commission have a recommendation to City Council the soonest. And we see sort of two timelines for those, if depending on what is chosen as the public benefit to exchange bonus FAR for first. Alternative two is a little bit more complex and is going to take us some more time. And that's where we're saying, if you want to get all of the public benefits, we can implement them all at one time, but it's going to take us some more time to do that and figure out a way to administer it and analyze how to do that. And alternative three is just the most complex. And we believe we gave a example of that with, I think it was the Bell Red example in Bellevue, where it's sort of they have a lot of public benefits off of a menu sort of that you could provide, but there's tiered bonus FAR assigned to each one of those public benefits. And we think that that's more comprehensive and complex and is going to require more time. And then we should also keep in mind, as a matter of having to have public engagement and public hearings, that factors into these timelines too. So these are sort of our estimates and can flux. And with that, I think maybe we could ask more clarifying questions before we go back a few slides. And then I'd like to propose to the chairman and Director Cotterman, maybe we should consider talking about affordable commercial before housing affordability, since we do have a guest with us this evening, maybe it would be best to start off with that conversation. So I'll leave it at that.
You faded away a little bit on towards the end there, Senior Planner Lamb. I think I could hear you, but you were fading.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I was just saying, I guess it would be a good opportunity now to ask clarifying questions, maybe before we start talking about deeper housing affordability specifically, or affordable commercial specifically. And then sort of as a follow-up to that, I would propose maybe we discuss affordable commercial first, since we do have a guest here with us this evening who could help us with that discussion. So
I'd agree, in consideration of the time of the economic development manager, Ash, we should do that first. So why don't you bring us back to the questions on affordable commercial space?
okay.
And oops, overshot.
There we go.
So commissioners, clarifying questions first before we begin specific discussion around these questions. And I'll scroll.
Mr. Chair, I'll also note for the commission and also for anyone viewing that the questions are also in the packet on page 10.
Yes. I do not see any commissioners seeking clarifying.
Commissioner Gustafson has her hand up.
Oh. Yes, Commissioner Gustafson.
Thank you, Chair. So for Portland, for the requirements for the Portland program, do they have to be local and woman-owned and people of color owned and financially qualify all at once, or is it 2 or 3 out of those at one time?
I believe the latter. It provides, so depending on if you fall in either of those categories, you qualify. But I could get clarification because that's a good question. You might, for instance, be a minority business enterprise, but you might not qualify with the financial limitations that they have. So that is certainly something that I could follow up on for you.
I'm not specifically familiar with Portland, but most programs usually have a menu of qualifiers and you have to meet one of those. It's very difficult for someone to meet multiple qualifiers in those instances. So I think the commission should probably approach it from the standpoint of what are the qualifying criteria that you would like to see used as far as eligibility for that particular bonus affordable commercial space.
Commissioner Curd.
Thanks, Chair. And thank you, Senior Planner Lamb. One of the things in the packet for affordable commercial space that was discussed was technical assistance and guidance, which would be provided in addition to restrictions on occupancy and tenants. What sort of technical guidance is envisioned for affordable commercial space?
Well, so that's a really good question. And I would almost say that that's a discussion that we should all have, whether that's something that we want to include in this program like Portland did. I think that's one of the arms of their program is, not only does it have, a system for delivering like physical affordable commercial space, but another arm is that they provide technical assistance, and another arm is that they provide grants to small businesses and those businesses that fall in that category. And so I don't know if I could answer that question, but if that's something that we did want to do or that the commission wants to do, I think staff's perspective is that that's expands sort of the scope of how you would administer something like this. And so that's just one thing to keep in consideration.
Yeah, just to pick up on that, if I could briefly, I think administration of that is going to be an important consideration because right now we don't really have a lot of staff. We have Ms. Ash as our economic development manager, so we'd be relying on her to provide any technical assistance. And I'll ask her in a minute to speak about what that technical assistance might be that would be helpful for businesses to help them be successful. But I think we also need to look at this program in terms of what would the city be what would we have the capacity to administer? So Portland is a great model, but it's only certain portions of it are scalable to what Bothell can do. So we want to make sure that we're being realistic in how we approach this as well. And it may be that we start out small and we can grow the program over time. But I would ask Ms. Ash if she could maybe chime in here and talk a little bit about what type of technical assistance would be beneficial to businesses, whether the city could provide that or if it would be some type of outside assistance.
So,
And I do see Commissioner Aldrich has her hand raised. So after Ms. Ash speaks, I'll recognize you. Sorry for the interruption.
That's okay. So there are a variety of resources that are readily available for businesses at all stages of their life cycle. They're starting up, they're expanding, or they are at the end, and they're doing succession planning. What we would do is refer our businesses to those local resources. And there are a variety, including financing, microfinancing to SBA loans. So I actually think that is probably the, once you decide what type of businesses you want to attract and who you want to take advantage of these opportunities, I actually think that's probably one of the easiest decisions is how to get them services.
Thank you. Commissioner Aldrich.
Thank you for that explanation, Jeannie. I really appreciate it. My question is, I think for Senior Planner Lamb, about the 10-year duration for Portland's ACT program. I'm curious what the relative benefits are or what the purpose is of having a 10-year duration. Is that they can't stay longer than 10 years or that it's to encourage them to stay 10 years so there's less turnover? Can you answer that for me?
Yeah, I think it's helpful to think of it sort of like the housing affordability duration of how long units have to stay affordable. If I remember from our interview with Prosper Portland, the 10-year duration is sort of like a protection for business owners who fall in these categories to sort of be, can you all see my screen? I just got a notification that
I can see your screen, but not you. I don't know if you can do both at the same time.
Oh, okay. I'll try to figure that out. I'm sorry about that, but it's sort of a protection for the tenants and written into the administrative rules. So, it's like if the building owner is leasing to somebody that qualifies and within 4 years they leave for whatever reason, the program is still doing what it was created to do, which is to provide opportunity before, going to somebody that can pay market rate. And I think that's the idea behind it.
So under this scenario, excuse me, after 10 years, that space could, I'll say, revert to market rate as opposed to affordable space. Correct?
I believe so. Yes. I was just looking at the administrative rules today, and I think that is how it is set up, is that after that 10 years, I mean, I don't want to say it's like a, free for all, but they're not bound to, those constraints after the 10 years has expired.
So one question for the commissioners might be, should there be a duration in the requirement for affordable commercial space? And if so, how long should it be?
Yes, I think that would be a question, and it's something we'll also have to analyze as part of the pro forma for that. Is what would make sense from a bonus standpoint that's actually going to be an attractive incentive. So if we make it too short, we're not getting enough of a public benefit. If we make it too long, no one will take advantage of it.
Thank you. Other comments or questions from commissioners?
So Commissioner Gustafson has another question or comment.
Okay, Commissioner Gustafson.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. My question is for Jeannie Ash, I believe, Manager Ash. If we were going to look at some of the current cultural anchor businesses in Thrasher's Corner, would they fall under these proposed requirements? I'm thinking about Apna Bazaar, because that's one of 3 businesses in a chain across the area. And I'm thinking of International Market, which might be owned by a person of Eastern European heritage. And he has businesses in both Bothell and Bellevue. So I'm wondering, are the businesses that we might want to keep even going to fall under these parameters?
Here's my curiosity, and I don't want to get in too deep into the weeds, but I need to be caught up to speed. The intent of providing affordable commercial space, is it to keep existing businesses, assuming that the property gets redeveloped, or is it to help women and minorities start a business who face barriers to starting a business? And that would help me. So with regards to Commissioner answering your question about those 2 businesses, yes, they would qualify, but those businesses have been in there for a while, and I'm not sure from a perspective of redevelopment how they're going to be impacted because of their location.
I think part of the answer as well is who would the commission like to qualify?
Right.
And I think Ms. Ash has outlined sort of the 2 general categories there. And it's important for the commission to make some distinction, because the approach to those is going to be very different. If you're retaining a business, that's different, if they're being displaced, versus trying to encourage or be an incubator for startup businesses. Both can be served through this, but the programs to serve them are going to be different.
And if I could add one more to that, and again, is that when I think about redevelopment and developers in Canyon Park, I don't see the strip malls as the first place that's going to be redeveloped, or where they're going to take advantage of the height of the FAR. I think that I see that happening more in the core of, inside Canyon Park. And that's where a FAR and attracting a woman or minority business or supporting one already that would be beneficial. So that's my other kind of caveat about when you think about this.
And I think Commissioner Gustafson raises a good example for the commission to think about. If you have a minority-owned or immigrant-owned business that's successful and has several locations, do they need that assistance? Or is there another reason, like we were talking about, to try to retain them in a certain area? Both valid reasons, but that's something for the commission to consider if that's what you want to use as a qualifier. The other thing that I need to mention here is we also have to run this by our legal department, because under state law, we are limited in what we can do. So that'll be one of the things that we'll have to get through legal review as well.
We'll look forward to that.
Yes.
So, commissioners, I'd like to focus a little more on the first question and see if we can give staff some guidance on that. So regarding eligibility to qualify for such a program, we have these examples here. Are there, do those include the areas commissioners are interested in? Is anything missing or anything we should remove?
And Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry to interrupt, but if I could interject here, and this is, I should have shown this slide earlier because it might provide some guidance for especially that question that you just asked. But we do have some language in the sub-area plan. And like, for instance, this first one up top, it mentions that the affordable commercial program could be for startup entrepreneurs, local immigrant, people of color, and disadvantaged populations. And I think I'll just read these real quick as well, just in case it helps. The next one is, building a flex shell that is ready-made to immediately accommodate small startup or micro businesses, reduces the initial financing needs for enterprises on a tight budget. And then this last one, retention or relocation incentive. It said as Canyon Park evolves, redevelopment could physically displace existing businesses, or rising rents may pressure some businesses to move. And to support the lively and diverse business environment in Canyon Park, developers could agree to retain current businesses in the new development for a period of time or offer relocation assistance. And so those kind of touch on, some of the points that have been made already in this discussion. So hopefully that's helpful.
And I would note that the third recommendation says could, so it's not in that impacts it significantly. So, okay, back to the questions then. Because we do want to give you direction. So, commissioners, Commissioner Alderks.
Thank you, Chair. Jenny Alderks here. I would just suggest, for clarity's sake, on the tenant's statement, just make it clear that it's or instead of and, that we're not looking for a very specific individual that qualifies in all of those ways, but that, well, I get exactly why it says that way, because these are the people who are permitted to be there, but it just to make it hopefully clear that it could be an or as well.
Yeah, I've made a note of that. Good point. Thank you. Commissioner
Dodd.
Thanks, Chair. So this first example is just an example at this point. As I'm reading it, the example is Portland's program. So I think one important definition is this is so specific, but we need to figure out what we mean by local. Is it within people who live within city limits? Is it people with a Bothell address who might not live necessarily within city limits? Is it cities surrounding us? Like, we want to make sure that we're all talking about the same pool of talent. And then otherwise, I do support sort of making sure that we have a focus on historically disenfranchised groups like women-owned businesses, minority-owned businesses, and financially qualified businesses is something I'd like to learn more about. Is that, people who are starting off with less capital? Is that people, or people who maybe their business doesn't make, like, I guess I'm wondering exactly what that would mean. Maybe I need to know more about the Portland program, but those are the two questions I have right away: is what is local and what is a financially qualified business? Thanks.
And I would continue on with the discussion of financially qualified. I know the interest is in having it be or. You'd be one of these categories, not all of them. I would want to be certain that one who is in one of those categories, women-owned, minority-owned, who has significant financial resources, wouldn't be at the head of the line. So I don't know how we would do that. I don't know if that's practical, but that's something I'd like to look into as well.
Mr. Chair, I'm not sure I heard everything correctly. Did you say that you think they should be at the head of the line?
I think they should not be.
Should not be.
I'm resisting giving examples of particular entities, but if there were an entity that were woman-owned or minority-owned that was very financially well off, we wouldn't want them to take advantage of this before someone else who did not have the financial resources.
Okay, so if they're financially well off, they would not be at the head of the line.
Correct.
Okay, I thought I heard the opposite. That's why I wasn't sure. I want to make sure I was clear on what you were proposing there. Thank you.
Might have mumbled. All right. Yes, Jeannie.
Thank you. I would ask for clarification on something that's not as on the list here. And as a little bit of background, as you know, Alexandria has bought 11 buildings in Canyon Park, and they are going to be developed slowly. And their goal is to create a biotech, a major biotech hub, continue to build on what we already have. Within that park, there are a lot of small businesses that are sales offices, architects, engineers, a variety of professional services, and they will be displaced. And so the question is that when you're deciding who qualifies as a tenant for relocation or support, is what's the sector? Is the sector going to be retail, retail restaurant space, or will it be commercial professional services? That's my question for you.
Commissioners? I'm not seeing anyone. Oh,
Commissioner Robson has her hand up.
Yes, Commissioner Robson.
With regards to Jeannie's comment on that, I'm wondering, because again, that would be two separate issues, though, between retaining and recruiting new businesses. Would those be different terms, like on separate lines, or to retain and to encourage new businesses? Or are we trying to come up with the kind of people we want to support on both retaining and encouraging, supporting new tenants? So those would be two different line items, right? Or would they be the same requirements? I think that's my question. Does that make sense?
I think the requirements could be different, but the question to the commission is, do you want a program that serves both of those groups? In other words, do you want a program that helps with retaining businesses that might be displaced, as well as supporting businesses that are just starting out. So there are two types of businesses, two separate programs, but do you want both, or do you want to stress one over the other, or just one? I think that's the question to the commission. Does that help?
Yeah, I think so. I think I was under the impression that we were doing both. So it's my fault. But I understand that it helps to say that it's two different programs.
Yes.
And both of those programs, emphasizing one over the other, both on the table. Thank you. Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Thank
And
you.
we're looking for the commission as a group to tell us as staff which you would like to see. So
Commissioner Dodd.
Thank you. It's been so long since I last spoke. So for Jeannie Ash's last question, I believe, and Mike and Nathan, you'll have to correct me, but I believe the zoning applied to different areas, different parts of the sub area will kind of determine what businesses will be allowed to operate there. Because I know there's some places where we said it needs to be more of like an active use, like you can't have certain kinds of businesses on what are considered like the sort of the active streets where we want like retail or dining or whatever. So that would be some of it in my mind, but I don't think we should limit the type of business, because in places where other uses are permitted, I think it makes sense if you have, like a woman-owned, startup, low-cost law firm that needs an office or something, like, I don't know, defending puppies or something amazing like that. So you get the idea. So that's one thing that I wanted to make sure that I was kind of thinking through correctly as far as uses, because I also wouldn't want necessarily all of the cool spaces to go to things where you can't go in and buy something or experience something either. So I think we address that in zoning. And then, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry about the puppy. And then the other, I'll stop there.
So you're correct. The zoning will determine where these uses can locate, but there are a couple of nuances to that. So we allow some accessory uses. For example, in the employment area, if there's a startup deli, then they may have an on-site deli that would be allowed as part of that. It may be, in association with offices or laboratories, or it might be just like you said, it may be office space, that they set aside a certain amount of office space as affordable to whether it's an attorney or a small insurance firm or what have you. The other aspect to this, the other nuance would be if we have a fee in lieu aspect to this program, then we may collect a fee from a business in the employment area that's building a new building, and then apply that in a retail area. If there's a certain amount of retail space that we want to create an opportunity for. So there are different ways that could work. It's getting a little bit more into the weeds than we necessarily need you to at this point, but I hope that helps.
It does. And since the puppy's outside, I'll take the moment to say, the other thing is I do think either encouraging, incubating new businesses or helping businesses relocate that are displaced is important, but I would want to have really nailed down specifications that are financially qualified, because I think some businesses would be a bit too successful for me to be comfortable qualifying them under this program too. So I'd want to make sure we have a good balance there. If we don't want people displaced, but if you're making money hand over fist, you may not need help with relocation. So kind of two sides there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
And Commissioner Curd, I believe you had your card up.
I did. Thank you. There's a lot of things, a lot of questions here, and I don't know how helpful we're being addressing parts of each one. But I want to jump back to who specifically is eligible. And I concur with the example that's given. I think that's a great place to start. I think that it could probably, as long as it's flexible, I think that a lot of times this is subject to a good deal of legal interpretation too. And so I don't want to set too strict of boundaries on qualifications for tenants. Just suffice it to say that it's my preference to keep it, to economically disadvantaged businesses as well. And then in terms of the question about what types of spaces are we looking to focus efforts on, I'm actually leaning more towards a preference for retail space. And the reason why is we're trying to make a there, and there's not really a neighborhood in Canyon Park right now. There's a couple of small retail opportunities for people to shop, and they do service cultural anchors, and that's really important. And I think that if we're building a neighborhood from scratch, it's going to need retail, and it's going to need retail that's exciting and that brings people in and creates a neighborhood that's diverse and that has opportunities for employment and places for people in this tech hub and biotech hub to engage. And I think that retail is really the only way that I'm looking at that. I think that there's a lot of opportunities in the nearby vicinity. We looked in the pro forma when we were going through Canyon Park stuff. There are other opportunities for sort of flexible business space, a lot of like the warehouse district in Woodinville. There's North Creek Business Park. There are other opportunities for more office-oriented businesses. And I think that nailing this down to retail will really sort of solve some of the questions and the concerns that we'd had when developing the Canyon Park sub-area plan. So I'm leaning more towards retail. That doesn't mean that it can't still be a flexible space. And I think that in any way, these are going to have to be very flexible and able to kind of go with the flow and be what they need to be for whoever the tenant will be. So that's my 2 cents. Thank you.
Okay, continuing the discussion on eligibility, excuse me. There was a reference in the packet to the city of Bellevue having a childcare incentive, and affordable childcare is extremely important these days. When we look about affordability and livability. So I'd be interested in how that Bellevue incentive was structured and whether we could include that. When you talk about, vibrancy, certainly having a bunch of little kids walking around adds some interest to an area as well. So I'd like us to look at that as well.
Okay.
Other commissioner comments? Commissioner Dodd.
Commissioner Dodd's
just-
going to suggest puppy care as well.
I was actually going to say, as the parent of a kindergartner, I enthusiastically support the chair's call out of that in the packet because, and since I live here, I mean, there are just a dearth of childcare options, especially moderately affordable. Oh my gosh, I can't second it enough. So thanks.
Commissioner Gustafson.
Thank you, Chair. This has been a really great discussion. And the hardest part is going to be making a decision between all these good options. So I'm going to throw out 3 controversial statements just to get the discussion started. And the first statement is more overall, and it's with all the promise of affordable housing and affordable commercial space, I believe we should not be considering the environmental incentives. I think this is a later discussion, but there's so much going on, we need to take those off the table. The second controversial thing I'm going to say is that we should focus on retaining businesses instead of recruiting new businesses. Again, up for debate, but I think one of the reasons why we originally got into the affordable commercial space was concerns about gentrification. And the third point of debate I will bring up is that for qualifications, a lot of those qualifications can be, I would say, gamed, unfortunately. Local, you can always get an address. Unfortunately, woman-owned, it can be very difficult to tell who's actually owning the business, a woman or her husband who puts the name on the application. Financially qualified, I mean, you can always show revenues and expenses to be different. And I think the only one that cannot be gamed is people of color or minority owned. I think that often it is very difficult for people of color to have those generational wealth connections that allow them to raise capital. And in this case that a person of color is able to break through that and work twice as hard to be get that money, I don't think we should penalize them for having done that when it comes to having that leg up and starting a business in Kenyon Park. So 3 controversial topics. Please let me know what you think.
So commissioners.
Could I ask you to restate the second one, Commissioner Gustafson? I'm sorry, Mr. Chair. I just want to make sure I captured that one.
Thank you. My second point was that retention should be prioritized above recruiting. And again, I'm not sure of this, but putting it out there for debate.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Dodd.
Thanks. I appreciate the bravery in making your controversial statements, Commissioner Gustafson. I agree with your first one. I think right now affordability is more top of mind for me. I disagree with the second one. I think we've already seen a lot of gentrification in Bothell, and I think we've seen very few of those businesses that have been displaced come back in different spots. So if we focus on retaining what's here today, we miss out on people we've already lost. We miss out on the next generation. Gen Z is terrifying, and I'd love to see what they come up with, just as an example. So that's where I'm at with that. And then on the third one, I look forward to more discussion from the rest of the commission. So thanks.
I was muted. Commissioner Alderks and then Commissioner Robson.
Thank you, Chair. Jenny Alderks here. I'm going to add another discussion topic to our already just bustling discussions so far, and that is the duration of the lease term. So I heard Director Cotterman make a statement that, too short and not too long, and I am leaning towards 10 years is too short, especially since we're talking about the sub-area redevelopment plan being over the course of 30 to 40 years. And so 10 years would just be, a brief part of that whole entire process. Because to Commissioner Curd's point, we are building a neighborhood. We are creating a community here that does not currently exist. So I would lean towards closer to 20 years. If not, talk about, could we expend this into the 30-year mark, where we know that that's where in 30 years, we're going to be significantly towards a new community, a new neighborhood, and that will become established. And we might start to see some turnover in these commercial tenants and get some new blood, new exciting new concepts in. So that would be like, maybe 20 years is just right and 30 years is too long. But those are my initial thoughts and what I would like to pose to the commission.
Thank you. Commissioner Robson.
Thank you. I really want to express my appreciation for the other commissioners' points of view on this. I think that you guys are bringing up some really good issues. I'd like to run counterpoint, not necessarily that on some of the things that people have brought up. specifically regarding gaming the system, I think that it's easy for anybody to game the system in any capacity. One thing that I worry about is, if I'm not mistaken, Commissioner Gustafson was saying that it's difficult to feign a person of color. Obviously, that would be difficult to feign. But certain people of color, even within that grouping, there are people who are more and less disadvantages when starting businesses. For example, an immigrant coming from a wealthy family technically qualify as a person of color, and they may be transitioning their business to the international scene, and so or to an international forum. So there, I think that when we talk about, I don't think there's any way to necessarily make these requirements ironclad. And I think maybe what we need to think of, we could add the other thing that I was thinking of, well, could we use historically disadvantaged groupings of people? But again, all of these are so amorphous that I think no matter what, the gaming might be something we are stuck with, and instead may just want to mandate from the heart, just because I do think that trying to avoid gaming it is maybe not going to be as fruitful as we're hoping. That's my counterpoint.
Commissioners? Commissioner Curd.
Thanks. I will try to remember the questions at hand. The first question, well, now I'm lost. The first question was about tabling further discussion on environmental regulations as bonus FAR. And it's really hard for me to say that we should do that too, except we're in a housing crisis, and it's difficult as someone who lives in affordable housing in Bothell and who sees people around me who are losing their ability to live in the city quickly with effects of the pandemic, and just increasing unaffordability here. I think that, this is affordable housing is really going to be my driving issue with bonus FAR. And I can say that with certainty now, even though the environment is so critical, and the environmental benefits are so great. I think that the ability to make this town livable for everyone who's still here right now and for the future means that we need to kind of place emphasis on the biggest fires first. And so I will agree with that point number one. Point number two from Commissioner Gustafson was about, I'm sorry, can someone refresh? I remember point three, but I think point two was about.
It was making retention the highest priority.
Right. Thank you. Thank you. So I am going to say that because a good number of the businesses, the cultural anchor businesses that we were concerned about and that we still are concerned about are actually outside of the sub area. And these are retail businesses too. I say my preference is instead to attract new affordable space rather than prefer to stop displacement at all costs. I think it's still a valiant effort and it needs to happen. There are lots of businesses that are experiencing displacement, just like people who are living here are being displaced as well. And so I think we also need to pick our battles. And right now, the way that our city boundaries are means that we are going to have a harder time retaining or preventing displacement of all the cultural anchor businesses without significant annexations, which is just not on the table right now. And so that's my preference. The third point, which now I've forgotten as well, was I think that was about
Gaming the system.
Gaming the system, yes. The state of Washington, there are RCWs about small business enterprises and women minority businesses. And I work at a small business that is owned by an immigrant, but we are unable to take advantage of the this is an anecdote. We're unable to take advantage of the state requirements and regulations for minority-owned businesses because despite having faced a lot of challenges in starting the business, the owner doesn't qualify under the fairly restrictive qualifications, I guess. And so there are state regulations. I think I'm echoing Commissioner Robson's point, which is it's hard to prevent people from taking advantage of loopholes. And that's something that might be beyond the scope of what we can realistically do with affordable commercial space stuff. But I hear that point, and I think that's really important to make this really targeted to the communities that are most impacted and are most at risk for not being able to start a business. And so, yeah. In terms of the last point, which was the 10-year duration, this is for a lease. It's not for the example is for a lease. It's not for, I don't think it's for the building as a whole. But there's MFTE right now is on a 12-year period. And that seems to be attracting that optimal balance between, a person who's looking to invest a lot of money into development at the same time as getting the reward or the benefit of delay or cancellation of taxation. So I want to be careful when we think about duration because it's not necessarily tied to the structure being accessible to affordable commercial spaces. We can, ultimately it's going to be up to an agency like Arch to kind of guide that determination based on what's out there right now. And it's going to be hard to, I think, pinpoint a date. I don't know if a lease is going to be or determining the length of a lease for an affordable commercial space, especially for retail, is going to be possible, especially with high turnover rates of restaurants in general. So that is what I'd like to add. Thanks.
Commissioner Aldrich, then Commissioner Robson.
Thank you, Chair. Jenny Aldrich here. I may have misunderstood the answer to the question that Director Cotterman gave me earlier about the 10-year duration. I initially thought it was about leasing, and basically limiting the amount of time that a tenant could be in that location. But then I believe the answer that I received was more about if the space can be considered affordable after 10 years. So I would like some clarification on that just to understand. But I feel like we're now kind of starting to go down our list of discussion topics one by one. And so if that is appropriate for me to do that at this time, I will start with Commissioner Gustafson's controversial points and say that on the environment, we are already making a necessary step in protecting the environment by working to increase density in this sub area. And as we are, looking at mixed use residential and retail, then we are already making a necessary and important step towards protecting and addressing, reducing sprawl and increasing density, and that has positive environmental effects. So I believe whether we do this or not, we will be having positive environmental effects. But the caveat there is to also recognize that as we increase density, we can also design an area that either increases traffic or reduces traffic. And in order to have the environmental impacts that we want in terms of the positive environmental impacts, we're also going to need to ensure that we have transit options in this area. And that is not related to this discussion here, but I believe that if we put density and transit together, we are going to be having the we'll be making environmentally friendly choices that previously are not in existence in that area. So that is sort of my justification for saying, yes, perhaps I do agree with Commissioner Gustafson and say that other environmental considerations would not be necessary in terms of this, because I actually already believe that it is kind of inherently in there if we can add transit, just to ensure that transit is a good option for the area. I believe the next one was retention is a high priority. I believe fellow commissioners have made some good points there. And I think of the need for, recently in City Council, there was a presentation about revenue generating centers and how necessary it is to create these spikes in our topography of revenue that we are able to generate revenue, which then speaks to the need for retail in those spaces, so that we are generating sales tax, because that's where the revenue is generated. And how many business owners that I personally know, that I've gotten to know, who have not been able to access affordable commercial space, where it's not just that we don't have access to affordable space, it's that we don't have access to space at all for retail. And we're losing a lot of really creative entrepreneurs that could make Bothell a place to be, where people want to come. And it's just necessary to be able to attract the new and innovative to our area. So I would lean towards not retaining retention, given that we would be talking about mainly Thrasher's Corner, that we would have to build in Kenyon Park before we get to developing Thrasher's Corner, and the retention, the timing, I don't believe would work exactly. And I also wanted to add in a point that Commissioner Dodd made about what means local. And I would just throw out there and say that my definition of local would be a Bothell address, so that we're not excluding people in unincorporated Bothell. So I'm very sorry for the lengthy reply, but that is what I've got so far. And thank you, Director Cotterman, for taking notes.
Commissioner Robson, and then I'll make a few comments myself.
Thank you. Commissioner Robson here. I wanted to thank Commissioner Gustafson again for her controversial points, but I also wanted to circle back to the action items that Nathan actually wanted us to comment on, and if there were additional items that maybe we're overlooking because of Commissioner Gustafson's slam dunk controversial conversation topics, maybe we're overlooking some of the input that Director Kahneman and Nathan Lamb needed from us. So I was hoping maybe he could circle back and, just point out anything we are overlooking. I wanted to also reiterate that I really like the childcare inclusion point, that I think, like the other commissioner, setting aside the environmental focus for right now would be okay. New businesses over retention and focusing on sales tax and retail would be great. But I look forward to getting a reminder on what the action, if we're overlooking any action items there.
So Senior Planner Lamb, you wish to comment on what you've heard thus far regarding getting you feedback on that first discussion item in particular, also the second one?
Yeah, and I apologize. I completely just got kicked out several minutes ago and had to join back in. I did catch your point. Actually, that's where I got kicked off, was your point about the childcare space, and I've jotted that down. But no, I think we're getting some good direction. Again, I've missed what sort of spurred some of the later discussion. So I'm not sure if there's consensus, but I think the previous commissioner that spoke sort of summed up at least the points that I heard when I came back in. It sounded like there was at least some consensus for retail being the primary land use that we would want to award bonus FAR for. And that you guys or the commission needs some more clarification on what the financial qualifications are with regard to Portland's ACT. It sounds like economically disadvantaged or historically disadvantaged was sort of what we got this distilled down to, and immigrant populations, so long as they meet some sort of financial qualifications. And I think there's plenty of ways that we can go about researching that. And off the top of my head, I know that there's ways to vet applicants, and where there's probably applications that we can get our hands on that show the criteria for, if you are even eligible to fill out the application, if you fall into one of those groups, then maybe you have to provide statements that show, you're not so well off that, somebody behind you wouldn't be better off with this program, so that you could prioritize maybe like a grading, an administrative sheet that allows us to grade applicants. So it sounds like we can do that research on our end and bring it back to you. And if I've missed anything, please do feel free to give me some feedback. The other thing I've jotted down very quickly was the lease versus building owner conundrum. This mentions a 10-year lease, but I think what a couple of the commissioners might have been alluding to is maybe some other kind of covenant for the whole building, and not just the lease, just a lease for one particular space, if I understood that correctly. But other than that, that's what I've jotted down so far in my scribble notes. So I'll let Director Cotterman weigh in if I've missed something essential.
Thank you, Nathan. I think you did a nice job summarizing all of that. Just a couple of things I would add. clarification on the lease terms and the way I understand this and the way that I think it normally works is that it is similar to the MFTE program, as some of the commissioners mentioned. So it's not necessarily setting a lease for a particular tenant. It's just stating that that space that is set aside as affordable would need to be available for 10 years. You may have one tenant for 10 years. You may have two tenants, for 4 years first and 6 years later or something like that, but it would need to remain affordable for that period of time. And that would be part of the requirement for that. And then this one in particular, I think in Portland, and I don't know if this is how it works, but this is how I'm reading it, it's saying even after it's no longer affordable, that space would still just be made available to those other qualifying tenants. So it would be at market rate, but it would still have to go to local women-owned or minority-owned businesses. That's how I'm reading that. And that's just an example. So there are, things that we can look at, and that's starting to get a little bit more into the weeds of how the program would work. We'll work on that later on as we get closer to that. The only other thing, getting back to Commissioner Robson's point, and thank you for bringing us back to all of the questions here. I think the only one that I haven't heard any discussion about is the last bullet about the fee in lieu, and whether that is something that the commission would like to entertain. I know that's not a favorite of the commission, as we've talked about with other things. This program may be a little bit different in that it's not creating a capital facility that needs to be maintained over time, but this would create a fund that could then be used in various ways to support businesses that would qualify under these programs. So it could be a rent supplement, it could be providing technical assistance, it could be a loan, it could cover maybe some administrative costs of the program itself. So I think we probably have a little bit more flexibility with how that fund might be used. And it wouldn't necessarily make sense in all cases that the developer of the new property would necessarily want to or be able to provide that space on site. So I just throw that out for some additional discussion by the commission. I think we got good discussion on the other three. The third bullet actually relates to the retaining versus incubator space, I think, and we've had good discussion on that as well.
Thank you, Director Cotterman, Senior Planner Lamb. So I'd like to weigh in on a number of these things, and I'll start with the last one you mentioned, the fee in lieu. I have been one of the greater skeptics of fee in lieu with regard to open space, because the issue of the developer avoiding the capital costs and moving the operating costs onto the city. And I agree that is not the case here. And I do find intriguing the idea of having some financial resources which can help some of these businesses. So I'm much more open to a fee in lieu program in this case than I am skeptical of it in the other case. So I'd say that right off. Regarding the timing and the prioritization, it just because of personal interest over a very long time, it pains me to set aside the environmental incentive. However, there was discussion here about the timing of doing these things. And I would certainly agree moving forward with the affordability incentives sooner, being able to get them in place, especially while the market is relatively hot and people are moving forward, is important. And then continuing to maintain the interest in environmental incentives. But let's, as I think Commissioner Curd said, which fire do you fight first? So I would certainly support moving forward first on the affordability ones, but keeping our eye on environmental ones. And I do feel I need to channel former chair of LEAT here, who would have us with solar panels on every building there. The environment is important, and let's keep that in mind. But yes, affordability first. I think we did address the retention. And as far as gaming, as was said, with enough effort nearly anything can be gamed. And there was an instance not too long ago about a former professional athlete who put his name on a business as a minority-owned business, and it ended up he had 5%. So that it goes to the broader question of administration. There are going to be a lot of administrative issues here as we move this forward. Who's going to track enforcement over those 10 years? Certain qualifications. Those are all important things, which I'm sure will come back to us later. At this point, we're giving policy level direction. So I suggest we not try to solve that problem right now and give staff the direction they need. So I think those were the point. The final question I had regarding the term tenure duration, and this might be a nit. I might be diving into the weeds if saying stay out of them. But my question would be, when would that 10-year clock start? Building is built. There's a commercial space there. It's not filled for 1 year, maybe longer. Maybe we're in economic downturn and spaces aren't filled. Is the qualified period ticking away when it's vacant, or does it qualify, or would we want the qualifying period to start on occupancy? Rather specific, not asking for an answer, asking to think about how that would be put in there. My thoughts there. Are there commissioner thoughts? In particular in the fee in lieu, because I don't think there was a lot of feedback on that other than Commissioner Dodd.
As a fellow fee in lieu skeptic, I do think it makes some sense in this specific circumstance. So I appreciate your thoughts and I agree with them on that, Chair.
Thank you. Commissioner Robson.
I also support the fee in lieu option and would like to have that more explored and developed.
All right. Commissioner Curd.
Thanks. I'm going to jump on that bandwagon. And I also support the fee in lieu program. And I think Jeannie Ash is here. I think that her feedback is going to be really critical in this program. When we were talking about open space and having a fee in lieu program, I think that the planning staff organizing pizza parties in public open space was kind of it was a stretch. But here, because we have some infrastructure already at the city level to, we have our ear to the ground and we know what programs might be helpful, and we have that communication line open with businesses. I think fee in lieu could do a lot of good.
And with the funds, we could actually afford to buy the pizza. And I think Ms. Ash had her hand up at one point, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Ms. Ash.
Yes, before I jumped off and before you move on to the next topic, I just wanted to make a couple closing comments. One is that I really enjoyed this conversation, and I so appreciate your passion for supporting small business and disadvantaged, historically disadvantaged people starting their businesses. And I really enjoyed that conversation. I also too want to let you know that this is a win-win situation, because for our large businesses, I think our largest employers will be equally as enthusiastic about this also, because as you know, they've been begging for more services within the park. And they really want to create the places for their employees to, to shop and to eat and to drop off their dry cleaning, et cetera. Also, too, from a workforce point of view, affordable housing at all levels, not affordable housing, but affordable childcare, huge topic, as you all know, but it is an opportunity for our largest employers to use it as an incentive to recruit employees if we have affordable childcare. especially for some of the manufacturing. Not all tech employees and life science employees are making six figures. And then lastly, I would encourage you to have some flexibility with regards to who qualifies as having a local address, because there are very few businesses, even the small businesses that are owned in the city of Bothell, that are actually Bothell residents. And that's it. And if you have no other questions of me, I will say good night and thank you so much.
Thank you for being with us tonight. It's been very helpful. And I'd remind the commissioners that this is a study session. We're giving feedback to staff as they develop the program. It will come back to us fleshed out with more specifics for discussion at a later date. With that, we'll continue discussion with the next item on affordable residential space. I'd suggest we take a 10-minute break since we're almost 2 hours in, and I suspect there'll be an equally robust discussion of the next item. I see a lot of head nodding. So I've got 10:46 on my clock, 10:47, extra minute. So I'll see you all in about 10 minutes. We'll come back. All right. All right, welcome back to the October 6th meeting of the Bothell Planning Commission. Before the break, we had a robust discussion around affordable commercial space. And Senior Planner Lamb, you also introduced us to a discussion on affordable living spaces. And I believe you had a similar slide with some discussion questions that formed a real good basis for discussion previously.
That is correct. Let me go ahead and pull my screen up again.
And Mr. Chair, while he's doing that, I'd also like to note that Mike Stanger with Arch has joined us this evening. So he's also here as a technical resource to help answer questions, but also to hear the discussion from the commission, because he'll be working on this piece of it. And we'll come back with answers to other questions that we can't answer this evening at the next meeting.
And it's always great to have Mike here with us. He provides a wealth of information. So welcome to the meeting, Mike. All right, so Senior Planner Lamb, this is one slide and there's at least one more on this, correct? Just to remind us.
That is correct. Let me, sorry, having a lag issue here. And there's,
no
yeah,
problem.
this one here.
All right. So commissioners, let's start the discussion on deeper housing affordability, layering versus stacking. Are there commissioner questions or comments here? Commissioner Aldrichs.
Thank you, Chair. I promise I'm not trying to be pedantic about this at all, but I just want to acknowledge that those tiered cakes have layers in them. And if I'm understanding correctly, option 3 implies that there is both tiers and layers in this cake.
Correct. So when the alternatives we looked at, alternative 3 would allow for both of these. And just to sort of help bring us back to with deeper affordable housing in particular. So we're trying to narrow down the framework because as of right now, the scope allows for pretty much anything, and we're really wanting to narrow down, what does the Planning Commission want to allow in terms of being able to use other city programs in conjunction with bonus FAR. And I think my counterparts would agree, and I'm so glad Mike joined us. But I think that if I remember correctly from Dave Boyd and his report to council, I think that when an area has mandatory affordability requirements like Canyon Park does, when used in conjunction with MFTE, there's a net benefit for the city in terms of the affordable units it gets, of course, but also the benefit is great enough for the developer that it is a real incentive, and that they're seeing it utilized in Bellevue, Redmond, and Kirkland. And that sort of is consistent with what we have heard in Shoreline, Bellingham, and Bellevue. So it's like, once you've hit once a developer hits that mandatory requirement, they go after MFTE and utilize it because they've already had to do the mandatory requirements, and it kind of sweetens the pot. Now you can make it even sweeter by offering some, there's a couple options we think are good options for, either choosing or modifying here tonight. But you could say, well, you qualify for bonus FAR if you deepen the affordability requirements beyond, mandatory and MFTE, or you could provide more affordable units, or you could utilize either of the above, or maybe even like a modification to option 3 would be both. Whereas, and that's layering, and or you could choose stacking. And so stacking is, allowing affordable commercial, affordable or green incentives and affordable housing. And they, continue to, it's additive. So you get more bonus FAR for more public benefits. And I think we just, as staff, we need help from the Planning Commission sort of parsing out what it is that you value, that you want to see. And I hope my cake analogy is going to be helpful and not and not hurt our discussion tonight. But I think that's the direction we need tonight. So I'll open the floor up. And
if I could piggyback on that, I think, and we've struggled with this analogy as well, but we like cake, so it seemed to work. I think the main difference, as Mr. Lamb was talking about, when we talk about the layering, and we may not be using these terms correctly, but when we talk about the layering, I think what we're talking about is in the same category of benefit, but it's sweetening that benefit, as he said, as opposed to stacking, which could be affordable housing, then adding affordable commercial on top of that, in addition to it, and then environmental or something like that. And I'll point to an example on page 15 of your packet. That's the Bell Red example. And if you look there, oops. What they show is stacking. And the way that their system works for Bell Red is they have that base FAR of 1. And then you'll notice in the far left example, and maybe I could share my screen here. Nathan, can I swap out screens here for a second? There it is. So in this example, and ignore all the other information on here, but what you see for in this example right here, residential development. So they have a base FAR. They can build that by right, up to 1 FAR. Then if they want to go above that, the first thing they have to do is affordable housing. They don't have an option. If they want to go above the 1, they have to do affordable housing, and they can get up to an additional 1.25 FAR for that. And then if they've gotten to that 2.25 and they want to go higher, they can get that either through parks or stream restoration or transfer of development rights from the rural area. And then if they want to go above that 3.5, they can do any of the other ones that they've already done. It doesn't matter. So that's the stacking that example that we're talking about. And we could end up with something similar in Canyon Park. And I think what we're asking of the commission this evening, if I get back to those questions, and these are on page, oops. I believe it's page 9 of your packet. As Mr. Lamb was saying, we're asking, do you have priorities in terms of, do you want deeper affordability first? Or do you want more affordable units? Or would you like to just leave that option open and just say the developer can choose as long as we're getting one of those two things? And any of those can work.
So Commissioner Alders first, and then Commissioner Dodd.
I will defer to Commissioner Dodd.
Well, all right. Thank you, Commissioner Alders. I feel very important now. So my question is more on flexibility. Like, let's say we leave it open for now. How hard is it to go back and say, okay, we're getting a lot of units, but they're not affordable enough. So if we want to pivot to deeper affordability, how easy is it going to be to do that in the future?
That can be done. There would have to be some additional analysis done to see what that would be. But if we've done both, I mean, if we're giving them the option, we've probably already done both. So maybe it wouldn't be that involved. I'll ask Mr. Stanger if he wants to weigh in on that.
Sure. Give me a second here. Sure. That as long as it's voluntary system, you can adjust it, as need be. The analysis that Mr. Cotterman suggested would also be appropriate, but it's not like a mandatory system where you're kind of a little bit more locked in.
Could also leave the discretion up to the city. And if we see we're getting, if we want more units versus deeper affordability, we can say that's the first option. And then we could switch that at some point, more like a policy decision. So the mechanics of it would be a little less involved.
Thanks, that helps. I'm kind of leaning toward leaving it fairly open, just to, in my mind, and I guess correct me if I'm thinking of this wrong, I think the more open we leave it, the more developers will, like, the more project ideas we get, like hopefully the more units we get, and let's get it going, but like, I guess if I'm looking at that wrong, definitely check me on that, please. Senior Planner Lamb or Director Cotterman or Mr. Sanger.
No, I'll just kind of jump in here first. I think you're referring to option 3. So I think that would qualify as option 3, sort of leaving the discretion to the department on a case-by-case basis, as opposed to doing one or the other. So I'm making my tallies, so that's where my tally went, was option 3.
And I think, Commissioner Dodd, you were asking about, would that be more attractive because of the flexibility, if I understood your question. And I think the answer is likely yes, to developers, if they like to have that flexibility. And I think, given the previous discussion by the commission, at this point, I'm not sure that what I'm hearing, at least this evening, is we're not necessarily concerned as much about the deeper affordability so much as making sure that we just get more affordable housing initially. And then we may start to move more toward wanting deeper affordability, which may work in conjunction with the MFTE as well. So that's another possibility. We could actually end up with both. Which is something that we've set up for, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, Mike, but I think for the GDC, the way we've set it up is there's a certain number of units that are required at a percentage of AMI, and then they can do the MFTE, which actually gives us additional units and deeper affordability for some of those units. Is that a correct statement, Mike?
Yes, the mandatory affordability also qualifies the project for 8-year tax exemption. If they wanted a 12-year tax exemption, then they would provide additional units and deeper affordability.
All right, commissioners. Commissioner Alders.
All right. Well, Jenny Alders here, and that I'm glad I waited because there was some additional insight and context there. one question is with the idea. So I'm visualizing something very much like on page 15 of our packet, like at Bell Red, and kind of thinking if I were to be able to choose or then recommend the priority that I would kind of stack my cake, I would start with this. And I am very open to hearing commissioners' thoughts on this. So we'd have our base, and then our first tier, would be number of increasing the number of affordable housing units. And I would actually instead of giving it, I'd like to ask, is it possible, instead of leaving it up to the developer, to say, as a city, we prioritize a number of affordable units above deeper affordability, but you can do both, and just separating them out and making them different layers. Instead of saying you choose what that layer is, can we say these are separate layers, and this is how we prioritize things. And then after that, we could add in, if I'm understanding correctly, add on top of that affordable commercial space, and then environmental. And then if you wanted to do more, it's basically figuring out how we define the portion of FAR that is gained with each level of your bonus, of these features. And so you could play with the numbers, right? If we're topping it out at 4.5, then you could play with what those numbers are to add up to a total of 4.5. And I apologize, that may be a messy kind of question, but I would like to hear kind of what the other commissioners think. And also, Director Cotterman, is what I'm describing even possible under this model that we're discussing?
Excuse me, I believe so. It starts to get a little complex, but I think what you're describing is basically the stacking system that we're talking about in Bell Red. So what it really boils down to, and I'm going to ask Mike Stanger to weigh in here again if he's much more knowledgeable about this than I am, but on a theoretical basis, as I understand it, I think it boils down to the value that we put on those bonus units. So whether it's square footage or number of units, and what level of affordability. So maybe we give more bonus credits or more bonus FAR for a deep number of deeper affordability units than we would for just affordable units at 80% AMI. So there are different ways that we can craft that system. And I'm looking at Mike because I'm making his job more difficult, I think, when we talk about that. But it seems like that's one way that we can get at it.
Yes, I agree with that, and would add that just to keep in mind that in a voluntary system compared to a mandatory program, the incentive has to be often has to be considerably more lucrative. You have to make the deal sweeter for the owner developer than you would if you can actually require it. And if there's an upper limit to how much bonus FAR you're willing to grant, then you may be bumping up against what you can get in return.
The math is what's going to be the complex part of this. And we have a ways to go before we could get to the math. But what we're looking for here is more of what the chair was referring to earlier, sort of the policy direction of the commission, so that we know what policies you want us to configure this for. And then we can come up with some different ways to get there, if that helps.
Thank you. I see Commissioner Gustafson.
Thank you, Chair, and Sarah Gustafson here, and thank you, Commissioner Aldrichs, for some very good comments. I must admit, I am a chocolate cake type of person and not a wedding cake type of person. I am going to put my initial vote down for layering and not for stacking. And part of the reason why, and I might need some more clarification here is that it's very difficult to determine what the first layer in a stack should be. And I am reminded of a very, very excellent comment made by Commissioner Aldrich like 6 months ago, where she mentioned that for a commercial developer, it might be best for them to do affordable commercial space. And for a person that does more housing, it might be easier for them to provide that unit of extra housing. So I don't think we want to decree that. Also, simplicity and timing are definite concerns of mine.
Thank you, Commissioner Gustafson. Looking for Commissioner Curd.
Thanks. I'm going to echo that. I'm opposed to stacking. I don't think, this is my opinion, but I don't think that the Bell Red system has been as effective as other ones in the area that we see, case studies that use layering instead. And so I want something that works right off the get-go. And I also tend to not like complex processes. So I prefer layering because it's more straightforward. It's something that a developer can easily understand what the benefit is, and something that we can tweak over time. I would tend to go with option 3 to keep it general. That's my vote.
Thank you, Commissioner Curd. Other commissioners? Oops, did I see? Yes, Commissioner Robson. Oh, where'd you go? I think you muted.
There we go. I would just like to say, after listening to the everybody's contribution, I think I'm leaning towards layering option 3 as well. My real priority would be broadening the number of low income or available residential units below MFTE. Is that how I want to say it? No.
AMI.
AMI. Thank you. Too many capital letters. Below AMI. But I do think it would depend on the project as how viable that is. So I'm going to go with option 3, layering as well.
Okay. I don't see any other commissioners. I'd like to weigh in. I think there's a need for both more affordable housing and also deeper affordability. I'm a little concerned as prices skyrocket that even on the rental level, 70% of AMI is going to be a pretty high number. But if we look at option 3, with it being a city priority, I think we get there. The city can look at needs at the time of the project, can enter into discussions with the developer on in the world of what's possible. So my vote would be option 3. Continuing a little farther though, we are going to hear at our next meeting on some other potential incentives. And I think where we will probably end up, from what I heard today, is moving forward on these 2 and kind of getting to the other ones later. Similarly, I'd like us to be able to get to stacking later. Go with layering on option 3 as soon as possible, get that affordable housing in those projects as soon as possible. And if in 2 years we are able to better develop the environmental, and I forget what the third one or the fourth one was, I think there are 4 benefits. If we can get to that other one, then kind of have a placeholder in the code to stack them. If a developer can make an adjustment, put Commissioner Vliet's solar panels on the roof and get some additional housing for that, I'd like to have that be possible down the line. But as far as action in the near term, I'd vote option 3. Scanning, I don't see any other. Commissioner Alders.
Thank you, Chair. And I realize one of the reasons why I am really into this conversation is because this is the culmination of many months of work that our city staff has put into, and it is complex, but it means that you all have taken into account the what we've communicated as commissioners, and so I very, very much appreciate that, and that you are bringing such complex and interesting questions to us. So earlier I was describing stacking, and but if I were to weigh in on the layering in conversation, Director Cotterman mentioned something about who gets to set the priorities, and we discussed whether that would be developers or city, if it could be a policy decision that the city makes. And if option 3 is the way that we go for layering, I very much would like to see the city deciding what those priorities are and working with developers instead of allowing developers to have the ultimate decision making on that. So that's my 2 cents in that regard.
Thank you, Commissioner Alders. Looking, not seeing any other commissioners seeking to weigh in. Senior Planner Lamb, have you gotten the feedback you need or want on this particular item?
Yeah, absolutely. I just wanted to say thank you so much for the feedback. As the guy putting the slides together, I take full responsibility for how to communicate these ideas. And as you're talking, I'm realizing that you're sort of you answered more than one question than we had on even just this slide. So I think we're getting where we need to be, and it sounds like we might need to rethink our next meeting if there's consensus that we want to just stick with the affordability components and defer the green incentives, but obviously defer to the commission and Director Cotterman. And then it sounds like we could spend focus time on the analysis that needs to go into option 3 and what the deeper affordability would look like if it was deeper affordability for a particular project versus more units. And that's just something we can't answer tonight until we've done that analysis. So yeah, I think we've gotten to where we need to be. In case I missed something, I'll let Director Cotterman weigh in. And I did want to just go to the next slide to make sure there wasn't a question I'm forgetting. Okay, we answered the first. We prioritized if we do stacking later on. And I guess this last question, how long should units stay affordable? And if the group wants to try to tackle that, I'm certainly welcome to, obviously hear feedback. But if we want to defer it until an analysis has been done, I think that could be beneficial too. So I'll just throw that out there.
Oops, you're fading again.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, I think if the group wants to try to tackle that last question, we can. Otherwise, maybe at the next meeting, once we've done some more analysis that could provide some insight, maybe we could defer that question. Otherwise, welcome the feedback tonight. So I'll leave that there.
I see Commissioner Dodd would like to speak to this, and regarding that duration, I'd like to hear Mike Stanger's feedback on that after Commissioner Dodd asks a question or makes her comment.
Thanks, Chair. So I raised my hand kind of quickly because I have some pretty firmly held beliefs on how long units should stay affordable, and it's definitely based on Mike Stanger's past information to the commission. And I recently got a chance to visit a Habitat for Humanity project in Renton, where we helped prepare a unit to be resold. It would be a very big uphill battle to convince me that they should not be affordable in perpetuity. I think it's super important. It allows the owners, specifically with owned units, but rentals also same thing. But with owned units, it allows the owners to sell the unit at a modest profit, step up into a next level of housing, and then have the unit be sold to another family who needs that leg up into this housing market. And I just don't see our housing market in Bothell getting like easier to jump into. So I grew up here. I've had to buy here, which was, oh my gosh. And I see a lot of my classmates from Bothell High School and other, people my age and younger and older, like struggling to buy things here. So my very firmly held answer, if I'm not being clear, is in perpetuity, but definitely curious on what Mr. Stanger has to say too. Thanks.
Is the question simply whether, weighing a shorter term versus long-term affordability?
Well, the question that Senior Planner Lamb posed for us is how long should units stay affordable? And Commissioner Dodd expressed a strong opinion that perpetuity would be the answer, but we're seeking your professional input on the question, leaving it open.
Sure. Well, we always advocate, we meaning our staff, always try to advocate for longer term affordability because for obvious reasons, for the same reasons that affordable housing is hard to produce, it's hard to replace when you lose it. So we think that that's a deep loss to the community if you're allowed, if they are allowed to expire.
So if I could just reframe the question just a little bit, in a voluntary program, I know in mandatory programs, with the exception of MFTE, which is a voluntary program, in mandatory programs, the affordability is typically in perpetuity. Since this would be a voluntary program, do most voluntary programs in these examples, are those in perpetuity as well?
Well, the voluntary programs that I know of that have land use incentives like this, where it's, you're increasing development capacity, or there are impact fee waivers or things of that nature, then those that I'm familiar with are lifetime affordability.
Okay.
The one voluntary program that is short-term affordability or limited would be some MFTE programs. And those do tend to be more, it's kind of comparing apples and oranges, but naturally developers would prefer to have MFTE program where they only have to keep the units affordable for 12 years.
Thank you. So Nathan, you got some feedback there. Does that help you out?
Yeah, that helps. And I think the genesis of the question when we were framing it was, and I think it was Bellingham, we found that they require a certain percentage of their affordable units for bonus FAR are permanently affordable. And so we were just thinking, if you layer in MFTE, what does that do in terms of pro forma analysis or what have you, where it might not be feasible or enough of an incentive, or it could disincentivize, everything altogether. And so I think really that's the discussion has been helpful, and I think an analysis is going to shed more insight for this particular question. But yep, thank you.
Okay. And Nathan, you asked about the next meeting and whether to continue to develop these two issues and focus on them, or do the other two. Could you go down to the slide on the schedule that you had? Right there. So presumably the bottom arrow, which takes us out 2 more years, would have us entertaining those other incentives, correct?
That's correct. The tiered and stacked system we saw taking till at least the end of next year.
Well, I'll weigh in first on this one then. I do have some concern about time spent is opportunity lost as development occurs. So my inclination would be to let's focus on these items, housing first, then commercial, and certainly keep those others as placeholders, but let's address what I think you've heard pretty clearly as a priority. And I'm perhaps speaking ahead of the commission on that. You should all speak first, but that's my inclination. And I'll look across to see if there's other feedback. I saw a thumbs up from Karsten. And I'm scrolling back and forth to catch y'all. I saw 2 more thumbs up. So Commissioner Dodd and Commissioner Robson. Senior Planner Lamb, does that give you the feedback? And Director Cotterman, does that work for the department?
I'll take first stab. Yeah, we definitely have what we need to move forward. And I would just ask the group and probably Director Cotterman, is there any benefit to having a discussion about green incentives at all at the next meeting? Or should that just be, sorry if I'm misunderstanding, but maybe that should just be deferred and not indefinitely, but until we're able to widen the scope again. Otherwise, on the affordability components, we have what we need.
And I think what I'm hearing from the commission is you're not looking for any discussion on the green building or green infrastructure items at this time. We did have additional information that was going to be presented by our public works staff in terms of what the city already requires as far as green infrastructure and green building. So if you're interested in that, we could bring that back to you. As far as additional analysis prior to the next meeting, I don't know that we would have much, if any, to be able to present to you next time. So it may be that, and those are really the main things that we had on the agenda for the next. So if there's no additional discussion on the housing aspects of this, we may not need the next meeting. That's my short answer.
Okay, looking across, Commissioner Gustafson.
Nathan, could you stop sharing for a minute? Thank you.
Much easier.
Thank you, Chair. Sarah Gustafson here. So if we are not going to have a next meeting, there are 1 or 2 points I'd like to bring up. One is, what opportunities do we have for public engagement on shaping either of the programs? It sounded like there might be some opportunities for engagement with the fee in lieu, somehow related there, to make sure that we're on the right track as commissioners and staff. Second point is, it might make sense to have affordable housing be affordable for the same length of time as the affordable commercial space, whatever that number may be. And the third one is echoing Commissioner Aldrich's thanks to Senior Planner Lamb for taking an incredible amount of information and making it not only intelligible, but also fun. So thank you.
Other comments? Commissioner Aldrichs.
Jenny Aldrichs here. I apologize to my commissioners for saying I'm super curious about the environmental options and would very much like to see them But I would defer to the consensus of the group on whether we will sit for that.
Commissioner Dodd.
My concern is hearing the information when it seems like we might not actually make a recommendation for a while. My attention span is such, I would like to hear it closer to when we actually need to make a recommendation to city staff. So that's kind of my thought on that.
Commissioner Curd.
I would like staff to devote time to the affordable housing and commercial space. And if it takes additional staff time to prepare any of the environmental goals that might not be considered for a while, I'm of the opinion that, yeah, we can wait on that. So it's not going to change necessarily. And maybe if it will change in the intervening time, it'll be good to have a full presentation later on. So if Public Works has something prepared, or if they were already planning on giving a talk, we could hear it. I don't know if it's going to change the firmly held beliefs that I have right now about the importance of affordable housing and commercial space. And so maybe that could be looped in if they've already prepared something into a future meeting as an extra. Thanks.
And what I heard Director Cotterman say, and correct me if I'm wrong, was that they were going to discuss current programs, basically what is there right now. I too would like to hear about those programs. Again, I think it's important that at some point we do bring in those incentives. I recognize and fully agree with the priorities as we've discussed them, but I'd like to keep at least that in the back of our mind, that there are these issues out there. Perhaps hearing about what they're doing will make us feel even more comfortable about waiting as we pursue this, because they do have things. So that's my 2 cents. Also weighing that against bringing everyone together for another meeting. I know people have busy lives, so I would, if this is a brief item, maybe we can tack it on to a meeting sometime later that doesn't have a full agenda. I don't know that we'd meet just to hear a short presentation, but I'd be interested in hearing that at some point when we have a lighter agenda with something we must do.
And that's what I was going to suggest, Mr. Chair, is I think this is good information for the commission. And I think you're right. I think it would probably make the commission feel more comfortable with not doing the environmental bonuses right now because of things that are already in code and city programs that are ongoing. So I think it'd be helpful for the commission to hear that. And we can tack that on to a meeting possibly in November, because I don't think we have a lot of really meaty items to come to the commission. They're important issues, but they're all still sort of in their developing stage. So there's not as much decision-making at this point. So we'll work on fitting that in to the agenda probably in November. We can do that. And I think what I'm hearing very clearly from the commission tonight is the focus on the affordable housing and affordable commercial space. So we'll put our emphasis on that as far as our time and effort, and that we would work toward some sort of possible stacking and include the environmental at some future date.
Leaving a section reserved in the code, as it were, for that.
Yes.
Yes. I think I see a general nodding of heads. Maybe it's relief on having a meeting taken off your schedules. But yeah, I think that's the consensus of the group. So I'd like to add to what others said, thanking Senior Planner Lamb for a presentation well made. I think you stimulated a very good conversation on this. I think the cake did get people going, so it served its purpose. It got people talking, so it worked. So thank you for that.
I was going to say, when I gave Nathan this assignment after he'd been here for about 2 months, the first time that he came to the commission, and he and I were trying to figure out how to formulate this, it was probably more like Jello at that point, and trying to figure out how to nail that to the wall. And I think he's done a tremendous job getting it down to a more manageable dessert. So good work on that.
All right, well, thank you. I think that then brings the study session on the Canyon Park sub-area plan to a close. With that, we would move on to unfinished business. Director Cotterman, do we have any unfinished business for the commission?
I do not believe.
And I saw Mike Stanger wave at us. Thanks, Mike. Appreciate you being here. You don't need to stick around if you don't want to. You helped us a lot on this matter, so thank you.
Thanks. Good night.
Thank you, Mike.
Director Cotterman, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have no unfinished business that I'm aware of, Mr. Chair.
All right, that sounds good. Reports from staff.
Just a few things tonight to let you know about. Commissioner Gustafson had asked last time about some questions regarding the social media guidelines and the Open Public Meetings Act. We've scheduled our deputy city attorney to come to the Planning Commission at your November 3rd meeting to talk about those items and answer any questions that the commission might have. So I just wanted to let you know that's Robbie Sepler. He's been with the city almost a year, and he'll be here. You'll get to meet him. He's been a tremendous resource for the Community Development Department on the multitude of legal issues that we deal with on a daily basis. So he will be very helpful and is looking forward to meeting the commission and answering your questions there. Also want to let you know in terms of the Canyon Park appeals, I think I mentioned last time that we were at the deadline for any appeals on the Growth Hearings Board decision. They did not appeal any of that to Superior Court. So that part is done. However, there was still the outstanding appeal that had previously been filed with Superior Court on the planned action ordinance that is proceeding. So I will keep you informed of what's happening with that. Our response to their initial filing was due today, I believe, and our attorneys have filed that. And I'm not sure what the schedule is, but this one will drag on for a while. So we'll keep you informed of what's happening with that. One other item, if you recall, the property in Canyon Park that we've referred to as the TIAA property, this is the one that's immediately west of Romac and the bus base location. It was previously proposed about 15 or so years ago for office development. And we had interest expressed in building apartments there using the existing pads that had been done. And that's something that we were talking about as we were working through the Canyon Park plan. We've received an application for that site, an actual application, and it's for 4 office buildings. So, and this is from the same entity that Ms. Ash referred to earlier, Alexandria Real Estate. They're a national real estate trust. And they've purchased, they're now one of the larger property owners in Canyon Park, and they've submitted this application. They needed to get in under the September 30th date. As you recall, one of the things that was included in the Canyon Park regulations was that grace period for projects that had been in the pipeline to some extent. There were a couple of them that qualified for that. Juno was one, this was another, and they needed to have a site plan submitted, a complete application by September 30th. So they made that deadline. So they're actually under the previous regulations for Canyon Park. Just to let you know about that. But 4 office buildings, I believe they're proposing 4 4-story office buildings. I don't recall the total square footage, but that would be a significant addition to employment opportunities there in the park. And unless I've missed anything, if there are any other questions from the commission about any goings on, I'd be happy to answer those. Otherwise, I believe that's the full report.
So given that they got their application in under the deadline and are thereby governed by the conditions before the plan, if something in the plan, for instance, these incentives were appealing to them and they wanted to add a little affordable commercial space in exchange for gaining some additional FAR, could their application be amended? And I don't know how likely that would be. Just
I think, well, for one thing, we don't have the program in place yet, so they'll be through before we get the program in place.
okay.
But even in a theoretical sense, the way we've treated these things in the past is no, you get what you have is what you start with at the beginning, and you can't change midway and pick some of the new regulations that you like, but and some of the old ones that you like.
Reasonable. Thank you.
One other thing I should also mention, I didn't give you a name last time. We have a new community engagement specialist. She started officially October 1st. She's already been with the department for a few years. Her name is Sarah Frost, and she is now officially part of the strategic planning team. And I will make sure that she comes to one of the meetings and you get a chance to meet her. Commissioner Gustafson asked about public engagement on this project, and we'll be developing a public engagement plan working with Sarah Frost, I should say. And we'll be presenting that to the commission at some point in the future as well. So we're identifying all the stakeholders that we want to speak to about this, as well as the general public, and invite comment on that. So we'll bring Sarah in and introduce her to you, and you to her at a future meeting. And we're very excited to have her on board. If any of you attended the Makers Market that was near City Hall in the Plaza area, Sarah put that on. That was her brainchild and her work, and that was completely outside of her job with the city.
Commissioner Dodd?
I was just going to say I attended the Makers Market and I actually got to meet Sarah there. So it was a really great, fun little happenstance thing, and it was really awesome. So I'm excited to see what she does with your department.
Thank you. We're very excited about this.
Great, good to hear. That concludes reports from staff.
Yes, Mr. Chair, unless Mr. Lamb has anything to add.
Nothing. One thing that had crossed my mind was we are expecting a first draft of a TDR feasibility study here soon. So hopefully be bringing that to you before not too long, before the year's over, hopefully. So that's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. We'll look forward to that. All right. Concluding reports from staff. Do we have any reports from members? Looking across the screen and seeing none. I think that brings us to the point where there being no further business.
Our next meeting would then be November 3rd, just to confirm that.
Yes, the October 20th meeting, per the discussion we've had tonight, has been canceled. November 3rd will be our next meeting.
We will send out notice to that effect.
Great, that sounds good. Commissioner Dodd, did I see your hand go up?
If it's time, I move to adjourn the meeting.
Okay, motion to adjourn. Is there a second? Commissioner Gustafson.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, thank you all. I think it was an excellent meeting. We had some really interesting discussion, and I hope that we gave staff some productive feedback. We'll look forward to seeing how you use that policy feedback to convert into actual code language and programs. So thank you all, and we'll see you in a month.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much. Bye, everybody.
8:51. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Take care.
Bye-bye.